Welcome to The Rally. This podcast includes commentary and conversations about issues relevant to clinical psychology. It is intended to educate, entertain, and enlighten, and is not a substitute for actual mental health treatment. Individuals who share personally here choose willingly to tell their stories to benefit you, the listener. All other references to clinical situations are altered or limited to protect confidentiality. For more specific questions or help with a personal situation, please consult a local mental health professional. Therapy, mental health, real life. This is Psych Rally with Los Angeles-based clinical psychologist Dr. Martin Hsia.
Welcome back. This is episode 11 of Psych Rally, and with me today is a special friend and colleague, fellow clinical psychologist, and the co-founder of Synergy Psychological Inc. in Sierra Madre, California, which he co-founded with his wife, also a clinical psychologist, Dr. Carrie Dilley. And he is the author of the book, The Game is Playing Your Kid, How to Unplug and Reconnect in the Digital Age. He's Dr. Joe Dilley. Joe, thanks for coming over today.
Martin, anytime. Thanks so much for having me.
This is a pleasure. Joe and I have a lot of fun joking around together. We've known each other through most of our durations in working in the private practice world in this area. We served on the board of our local psychological association together.
Yes.
And also collaborated on Moments of Meaning, which we referenced a few episodes ago. And, you know, Kristen, she came on for episode 6. And
you bet. Joe
shared something very personal, if it's okay that I reference it.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, and on those stories that we told about meaningful moments in psychotherapy, but he talked about his experience not as a therapist, but as a client in therapy. So check that out, momentsofmeaning.org. That was really awesome, Joe.
Thank you. Yeah, well, I felt compelled to share from the other side of the couch because it was such a novel experience for me and one that has made such a huge impact on my life.
Yeah,
so
it was very evident in how you told it.
Thank you.
Yeah. So let's talk about this book. The Game is Playing Your Kid. The Game is Playing My Kid? You barely even know my kid.
Imagine that.
Jeez.
Yeah, what an assertion.
Yeah, my gosh. Yeah. They say when you assume, you make an ass out of you and me.
I have heard this.
I don't know if I need to edit that out or not, but it's a tough crowd sometimes. So why this book? Why this topic for this book, Joe? And why were you the guy to write this book?
You bet. So, you know, as you mentioned, my wife, Carrie, and I own Synergy, the private practice that we have run for about 7 years. And day after day, hour after hour, a couple of years ago, I was noticing that I was having roughly the same conversation with each of the families with whom I was working. And it struck me that, you know, in addition to parents' questions about, gee, does my child have ADHD or what's going on academically? They were also saying, well, there's sort of this X factor that gets in the way of whatever it is we're trying to measure and the process of measuring it. And that is screens. And, you know, it's really hard because I think he's getting distracted, but it's hard for me to tell because he's online trying to access an assignment. And then I walk in and it turns out he's actually playing a game. Oh, but, you know, same thing happens, of course, to me or my husband, et cetera, et cetera. And I thought, oh, we're having the same kind of questions asked day after day, hour after hour, about what is really going on that is kind of obscuring the picture diagnostically and in terms of intervention. And so it struck me that, well, we are dealing here with a family situation, a family challenge that's not so dissimilar from any other family challenge. And so I know what to do about it. We're going to apply a family systems approach to a new problem, and we're going to work our way out of this. And so when I began to do that with these families, I thought, you know, I really should document what we're doing and make it available to more people.
Sure. And no surprise that this is an epidemic that's taken over the world and households all over the place because, I just have to think, you know, people, you know, our age or in their 30s or 40s, mainly whom are dealing with this in their households.
Sure.
When we grew up, there was maybe an Atari or an original Nintendo or a computer that took 15 minutes to load.
Yes.
There wasn't social media. There wasn't YouTube and smartphones and tablets. And so parents can feel completely out to sea with navigating this issue. Yeah,
it can be really challenging. And one of the messages that I hope the book conveys, and perhaps that we can convey today, is, well, wait a minute, there's hope. This is completely addressable at the individual family level. And then that can have a ripple effect on our communities too. So, even though I ran late because I was playing Pokemon Go on the way to this interview.
While driving,
of course? Well, while driving, naturally. I don't know how else you play it.
No one from the DMV will be listening in here. So
no. Right. I think it was fine.
Okay. All right. Well, you're here in one piece.
We made it.
Here we are. So, in brief summary, you mentioned a family systems approach. Some people might not know what that is, but just in general, sort of give a brief overview or teaser about the book and
you bet.
Some of how you help people with this.
Sure. So the perspective or the approach ran right in line with that word synergy from our practice, which is this idea that together we're going to get somewhere that we could not go in isolation. And the problem is not the person or even inside the person. Rather, we're looking at a holistic, systemic level challenge. And so the idea of applying family systems and saying, hey, the game is playing your kid is, look, the problem isn't the kid. And the problem is not even you, the parent. It's in the interplay among you, your child, and this, again, X factor, which might be called technology or the game. And so the idea is, how do we achieve balance? And like so many other things, it's a process of identifying, well, what's really going on, what's sustaining this homeostasis that has kind of taken over the family's flow. How come everybody's on their phone instead of looking at one another across the dinner table? And then how do we dismantle that in a way where everybody can still enjoy themselves and kind of have a great outing together?
Yeah, it's funny because we've all seen the 2-year-old in the stroller looking at stuff on the mom's iPhone.
Sure.
And you see the family of 4 or 5 or more sitting at the restaurant, and they're all on their smartphones, and yet at some level, in some way, I'm sure most of us are guilty of that at some level.
Sure.
And it's so tricky because, as you said, this is a new-ish issue.
Yes.
But it's so hard to tease apart because we are so dependent on technology, which has its benefits.
Yep.
But there's a lot of concern about how it disconnects people from one another. We're not engaged with our own kids or with our own spouses, for example.
Right.
And how that might even impact the developing brain.
Yeah, big time. So all of us are guilty of this at some level, I'm sure. I would agree. Now, if we were talking about something as, straightforwardly bad for you, like cigarettes, it wouldn't even be a conversation. It's what you said about the advantages, the inherent upside of technology that makes this so challenging, and the fact that it's not immediately unhealthy. So the way I would encourage parents to look at it is to treat it a little bit like junk food or candy or something, where are all of us, quote unquote, guilty of, awarding dessert here and there? Sure. Do we feed it to our kids in a steady stream all day, every day? Certainly not. So why are we doing that with technology? And I think it's because of some of those inherent advantages, like you said. Oh, well, my kid's quiet and he's kind of learning, and also I have some stuff to download myself. Wait a second.
Kids are misbehaving, and you throw a screen in front of them. It kind of seems like it calms them down.
Exactly. Seems like it does. What it really does is preoccupy them and engages them in a really pleasurable, dopaminergic experience where, hey, now I've got my pleasure center activated just by sitting here on the couch.
Yes. So say more about that. Dopaminergic.
Oh,
that's not just cool, like dope.
Right.
Yeah, right.
This is like fresh. Mm-hmm. Like if there were a neurotransmitter called fresh.
Like you're selling toothpaste or something, man.
Yeah. Minty.
Yeah, that's right.
So there's this dopamine drip when our pleasure hormones are activated, when our pleasure experiences take hold. And screen time and gaming is one of those pleasurable activities that increases the flow of dopamine in the brain. And this is not something to be afraid of, but it's also not something to ignore and just kind of let go. We were talking about, off recording about the Washington Post article about
New York Post.
New York Post article about the mom who found her son kind of in a trance after, playing too much video games. And yes, that's kind of what we would expect if we fed our kids too much chocolate. After a while, that initial effect that seemed to be helping our child to have a good time would eventually impact them in a negative way where it's too much of a good thing, and then you see all kinds of sequelae that you don't want to see, like becoming entranced or becoming super hyperactive and all those things.
Right, it's very concerning. I mean, by the way, the title of the article that Joe and I were looking at together and he referenced is called "It's Digital Heroin: How Screens Turn Kids into Psychotic Junkies" by a Dr. Nicholas Carderas. It was recently published in the New York Post. And so that's concerning, right, is it does, as you said, it has a documented effect on the brain.
Right.
And they describe it to digital heroin. It's described as digital heroin or electronic cocaine.
Right.
And that the digital detox effect of kind of being in a trance can be so concerning for a parent of a young one.
Yeah.
And yet there's some debate over whether it's appropriate to call it an addiction. Is
Sure.
internet addiction, is that a real thing?
Right. It's a real thing, and I talk in the book about how, okay, so call it an addiction or call it dependent behavior or really tough to break habit. It doesn't matter what you call it. Here's what we need to do about it. And part of the systemic approach is to not get hung up on the title, because again, you're not really getting anywhere by labeling your kid an addict. What we're wanting to look at is, the problem, the behavior is problematic. There's an unhealthy level of dependence here, and we have to break that by facilitating some other opportunities and reinforcing alternative behaviors so that Johnny is now hooked on following our directions and playing soccer and socializing, not just hooked on, this kind of virtual world that he immerses himself in while playing.
A lot of how I read the book, tell me if I got the main point or not. I hope I did as a fellow psychologist.
I'm sure you did.
I could be off here. I think a lot of the structures that you're recommending in the book are about, how do we make access to technology, smartphones, screens, what have you, not just a given.
Yes.
But the use of them can get out of hand.
Yes.
And parents sort of, how do we artfully create a structure in which those are the carrots that we dangle in a contingent way upon certain behavior, whether that's maintaining grades, getting homework, chores around the house, etc. Yeah?
Perfect. And I think that's where parents might already go, oh boy, I have to create a structure. And, how am I going to do that? Johnny already treats the screen as a given. And the answer is, well, let's look at the adult world. You're not asking Johnny to do anything different than what has been asked of you. What we're trying to do is move everything to a kind of when you, then you contingency paradigm. So you don't expect your paycheck before you go to work. You go to work and then you get paid. You don't expect the heat to come if you don't pay your gas bill. You pay your gas bill, and so the heat continues to come. And why we are setting up paradigms or contingencies with our kids to be otherwise is really sad and unfortunate, because it's setting them up to expect that the real world, the adult world, somehow operates that way instead of the real way that we all know it works, which is, I have to demonstrate responsibility before I obtain privilege. And so if we simply treat everything from chocolate to screen time as a privilege, I'm not saying you have to put every little thing on contingency all the time, but in general, if we look at those as rewards to be obtained rather than givens to be taken away, we are in great shape as parents, and kids much prefer that to, oh wait, I thought I had full use of this. Now my parents have taken it away.
All right, that you get used to it being a right
Yes.
That's taken away instead of a privilege that I have to earn or maintain.
Right. Yeah.
You and I, both as parents and as professionals that work with a lot of parents and kids and teens, families together, etc., is so much of what we do day to day is helping people learn how to and create the setup for delaying gratification rather than getting instant gratification. That might be about technology, but it might be about something else.
You bet.
People with substance abuse issues.
Right.
I work with people with gambling problems. Whatever it is.
Yes.
How do you, do the harder thing first?
Yes.
If you will.
Yes. Totally.
And we all struggle with that too at some level. So
Absolutely.
We can relate, right?
We certainly can. The problem is not inside your kid or inside you. That's part of how we're wired. And thank goodness. What a nice way to be, engineered that we are. Well, the pleasure principle from Freud would suggest we seek pleasure and try to avoid pain. Yeah, great. Okay, so that's kind of the given. That doesn't have to be a problematic thing, but we do have to figure out how to work within that structure.
Freud never would have guessed that his principles would be being applied to a tablet, a smartphone, what? I don't know
That's a good Freud.
I don't know where that Freud impression came from. It's
That's
way too early in the morning.
That's fantastic.
The coffee hasn't kicked in yet. So let me role play a little bit here. Because you've been trying to get the word out about this book, which is great. And I know you've spoken at some PTA meetings and other places where there are parents and perhaps kids as well.
Yes.
So I'm going to role play a parent for a second.
Sure.
But that shouldn't be too hard for me to do. But so I'm going to raise my hand and say, Dr. Dilley, isn't rewarding my kid for certain behavior and using screen time to do that, isn't that the same thing as bribing him?
Oh, sure. Yeah. Good question. One that comes up a lot.
I don't want to be bribing my kid.
No.
What are you proposing here?
Yes. Okay. Perfect. So a lot of parents have asked me about this, and that's why I address it in the book as well. No, you're not bribing your child for a couple of important categories of reasons. First, so by definition, bribery is reward before responsibility. And what we're talking about is just the opposite, responsibility before reward. So bribery would be, here, let me give you this thing. Now I expect you to go do that. So just
the big tip to the doorman, take care of this special guest. Or the mafia guy who says, yeah, right.
Right. And then you've just hit it, Martin, that you've tiptoed into that second category of why it's not bribery. Bribery tends to be a reinforcement ahead of time for things that are unsavory, so illegal, unethical, immoral. There is nothing about asking your child to get his or her homework done first before having some screen time, or to listen to your directions the first time in order to obtain more screen time that is unsavory. In fact, it's exactly the kind of character building that we're trying to do in our households.
Right.
We have to learn how to go to work and then get paid, unless, like you said, we're going to go to work as a hitman or something.
After hours. That's the
moonlighting. I think that's what we had to do on internship to make ends meet. Right?
On your internship, I won't speak for you. But,
right.
Yeah.
I think I'm in a protection program. Right?
Oh, okay. Well, you tell me if we need to edit that out too.
We'll edit that.
Okay, we'll see. Second question, Dr. Dilley, as an anxious and frustrated parent.
Sure.
What if my kid, you talk about incentivizing my kid for doing certain behaviors or not doing certain behaviors.
Yeah.
Isn't it problematic or sort of conflicting to use screen time as an incentive when that's actually what I'm trying to cut back on, or limit?
Fabulous question.
So confusing.
Yes. Okay. So I draw the analogy here between Western and homeopathic medicine. Western medicine would contend that, okay, there's a pathogen in the body, we need to obliterate it, possibly at the temporary expense of some surrounding structures or something. I'm way oversimplifying, obviously. And then homeopathic medicine would say, well, wait a second, like cures like. So we're actually going to treat the disease with a little bit of a dose of the disease to try to stimulate the body's natural immune response. And so the idea with using screen time to reinforce limits on screen time or responsible behavior around screen time is the Stanford marshmallow experiment, where we're trying to give a little bit more of what the child wants in response for a little of what we know they need.
Mm-hmm.
So if Junior can delay the gratification of the marshmallow, he'll actually get a second marshmallow. And I'd rather have my kid feasting on marshmallows at the right time than, sneaking one at a time in an impulsive fashion.
At the wrong time.
At the wrong time.
Yeah.
So what I'm looking at is, can my child turn off the screen within a reasonable time limit, because that is going to get them more use of the screen, because it is not playing them. They are controlling it. So, if every time Junior goes to turn off the screen, he cannot do so because he's so enthralled, then clearly there's a dependent behavior there that's problematic. And so the last thing I want to do is award more screen time. But if every time it's like, hey, time for bath, time for bed, time for school, he goes, okay, whatever. Well, great. You keep playing because you're playing. You're not being played.
I always just think in my practice, I try to sell these ideas as it's win-win.
Yes.
Right? Because if a kid is learning to, as you said, delay gratification, I'll get 2 marshmallows later if I wait and don't take the 1 marshmallow now. So many things are going to happen, right? I'm learning delay of gratification. I'm probably going to be more productive and learn better.
Yes.
In turn, my grades are going to be better.
Right.
Mom and dad are going to be happy, and I'm going to get the reward I want, and I'm going to enjoy it even more because I feel like I earned it.
There it is.
And everyone's happy.
Yes.
Yeah? I mean,
exactly.
So that's a win-win scenario if we can achieve that.
Yeah, that's exactly what we're going for. And so a lot of times kids hear about the title of the book or, what we're up to in this style of thinking, and they say, oh, no. And then by the time we talk about it, they go, wait a second, okay, I'm cool with this. Are my parents really going to follow through on this? And so a lot of the leverage has to be applied more to mom and dad than the student. There was a young teen in the waiting room at my office the other day who held up the copy of my book that's in the waiting room and said, Mom, you need to read this. It's fair.
Oh, all right.
That's what we're going for.
Yeah, you're like, a kid liked my book.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so you sort of, the assumption can be like, oh, we got to tamper with the access to technology, and kids are automatically going to be carte blanche against it. But
right.
If you really get into the book, some kid can see, well, there's reasons for it. It's not just about taking an authoritarian approach, right or wrong, because I'm your father or mother. There's good reasons for me as a youngster, if my parents can apply this artfully.
Exactly, and I get to retain a whole bunch of control and latitude and free choice as that youngster. Yeah. And boy, we sound old.
I know, we're calling people youngsters.
Youngsters and junior, and yeah, I mean, what are? But yes, that's exactly it. Where the idea is win-win, mutual benefit, and we know from the research that authoritative rather than authoritarian parenting, and of course, as opposed to permissive parenting as well, tends to generate the best outcomes. And so, hey, let's apply that paradigm, that same thinking to the technology issue.
Dr. Dilley, one more question from Mr. Anxious, Frustrated Parent here.
Yes.
What you're talking about is incentivizing my son or daughter for things that they should be doing anyway. Mm-hmm. They should be, coming home and getting their homework done before they take a break or relax. They should be doing their chores. They should be able to sit with us and have dinner without a screen in front of them. Yeah. Is it appropriate or necessary for me to incentivize them? Because they should be doing this stuff anyway.
Yeah, right. Yep. Well, I should be able to dunk a basketball and other things. So
there's a film that would say otherwise. It applies to you, not to me, but I can't dunk either.
I've never heard of such a film, Martin. I don't know what you're referring to. So about Woody Harrelson. Wait, let's see. No.
Sorry, I got you off track there.
Yes. Okay, it's something that they should be doing anyway. The thinking is, yes, but they're not doing that. And so rather than taking that authoritarian stand and saying, well, you should, and therefore you will, we're going to modify the paradigm so that we get Junior's buy-in to doing this. Wait a minute, you're telling me that if I do it the way you're saying, I'm going to get more of what I want? Okay, I could buy into that, which is, it's designed to be set up the same way that it is for we as the adults. Wait a second, you mean if I want to make $1 million, there's no rule that I have to do that overnight? I can work steadily and do that, and then I can spend the million or save it? You mean this is all up to me? Okay, yeah, I mean, it sounds difficult, but I can get behind that instead of somebody just telling me, you will go to work, or you will whatever. So yeah, the idea is until they're doing it on their own, which comes later because it becomes self-reinforcing.
Yeah.
Once they've, studied and done well on a test, and then they go, hey, that actually feels pretty good. And I always have the screen because
Sure.
I've earned it and so forth. That's kind of the self-reinforcing habit that we want to take over.
By the way, these questions from Mr. Frustrated Anxious Parent came straight out of the book, but I was so glad you had them in there because they totally nailed things that come up all the time in practice, right?
Yeah.
Classic questions. And maybe just to add to what you just said, Joe, right, is that question of like, well, why should I have to reward something I should be doing anyway?
Right.
Well, as you said, they're not right now. That's just the problem. That's why we're here talking. So wouldn't we rather have them be more motivated to do it and have the chance to earn a reward, at least for now?
Right.
And at some point, perhaps scaffold and build the ability to do it with intrinsic motivation rather than needing to do it for an external reward.
Of course.
But in the meantime, you sort of have to jumpstart that.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Yep.
Yeah.
And if we think about some of the extracurricular choices we make as adults, there are intrinsic and inherent rewards to those, but then there are often external rewards too. Like, I do a lot of distance running in my little bit of free time. So like 5Ks, or I ran the Mount Wilson trail race in Sierra Madre.
Nice.
Yeah. And so, that's rewarding to say you ran up a mountain. That's pretty cool. But there's also a time clock and a trophy presentation and, people watching. Those are external rewards too. And that's okay. We don't need to shy away from it. It's again, not bribery. And so if we can jumpstart some of the internal process by, modifying the external environment. Well,
why not?
Why not?
Yeah.
Especially because the other alternative, of course, would be to say, well, you should be doing it and you're not, so you'll never have screen time.
You're grounded forever.
You're grounded forever, right? So, okay.
And not helpful.
Now we're just in a, kind of a tug of war.
It's conflictual, and you're not using your leverage wisely.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
All right, we got a question in the crowd for you, Dr. Dilley, from Cooper.
Oh, hi, Cooper.
Yeah, I'm a 16-year-old, Minecraft player. I sound so old. My gosh, I can't even do it. Dr. Dilley, I'm 16 years old, and hey, man, not cool. Because, if my parents take away my computer because they think I'm, playing Grand Theft Auto or League of Legends all day, I won't be able to do my homework. And obviously they want me to do my homework, so I kind of need my computer. What do we do about that?
Yeah, good question, Cooper. Sorry if there's been a misunderstanding, because I think you're going to like the answer. Are you playing League of Legends all day or Grand Theft Auto all day?
Probably more than I should sometimes.
Okay.
But yeah, I try to do my homework.
All right, well, let's see if we can measure should. So you try to do your homework. How are your, and you don't have to answer this in front of the audience, Cooper, but like what I want you and your parents to look at are, so how are your grades? How is your academic performance? How are your relationships? Because if you can keep those things up and do little homework, wow, you're a pretty smart guy. You're relying on a lot of just kind of off the cuff test taking and natural intelligence. That's great. If, however, your grades are suffering because you don't do your homework as much as you should, and your relationships are lacking, then, obviously your parents love you and are going to want to help you address that. But the idea still, Cooper, would not be that your parents, remove or take away something from you, but rather that your level of responsibility taking indicates, results in your level of latitude and privilege on the screen. And so if all those things are in check and you've still got time to play lots of League of Legends, more power to you, dude.
Darn it. That's a good answer.
That is a pretty good answer.
All right. I'll let my parents read the book. Okay.
All right, Cooper.
All right, we got another question in the crowd for you, Dr. Dilley,
Sure.
from Dave, who is 14, and he says, hey, Dr. Joe, man, I get that my parents don't want me playing so many video games and like texting all the time, but that's how I connect with my friends.
Yeah.
And they want me to like live out in the real world and talk with them and meet up with people for real. But I feel like if they shut down limit my cell phone usage or my iPad or my computer, that seems like the opposite of what my parents want for me. So what's up with that? Yeah,
good question, Dave. And so let's make sure that your parents are not limiting those things unnecessarily. So you're connecting with your friends through social media or texting is really important, and I agree. And as long as you're doing so in a way that's safe and encouraging, where a lot of these things can turn into unsafe and really destructive conversations, as long as it's going in a more healthy direction, then I agree with you. You should be allowed to access social media and text your friends. I think your parents, you can understand why they would ask you to still sit down with them at dinner, or sometimes watch a movie with them, or sometimes even go out in public with them. And
questionable there.
and also want you to get together with people in person, because you're not designed to live in your room and connect with people just over a computer, especially because some of those people that you're connecting with that are supposedly attractive girls a couple of states away aren't really who they seem to be, because we have this whole problem of internet predators and so forth. And so they're just helping you, make sure you don't get into just an awful situation.
Yeah. All right. Another good answer. Thanks, Dr. Joe.
Sure. Thanks, Dave. Thanks for coming tonight.
All right. So that's our PTA meeting role play there. I'm not good at playing either parent or kid here, apparently.
I thought that was good.
All right. No, well, nicely done. So here's another question for you, Josie. What do you think we can kick this around is, one of the concerns that a lot of parents and adults, and probably adults in general, have is, kids, youngsters these days, even people not that much younger than us, and maybe even ourselves sometimes, right, is the art of interacting with a real person being lost, where, people learn how to read emotional and social cues off of other people through emojis, not through eye contact and body language.
Yeah.
What would you have to say about that?
Yeah, I don't know that it's being lost, but it's becoming obscured and perhaps made more complicated. And in some ways, maybe made, perhaps it's being enhanced or facilitated, because some of those emojis can be even more animated than a micro facial expression would yield. And so in some ways, we're able to express things that would be more difficult to express in a fully affective, person-to-person manner. And so, again, it's not all bad, but it is different. And I think maybe that's the main thrust of everything underlying this conversation, even right now, is just to be mindful and aware and tuned in to what's going on. So if Junior is in his room connecting with somebody, albeit virtually, well, hey, he is connecting with somebody. That's pretty cool. Who's he connecting with? For how long? What are they talking about? Now, we can't know all those things.
Yeah.
But we can help kind of build that same curiosity in Junior so that he's mindfully aware of what he's doing. Because what we're talking about is bringing what's unconscious and automatic to conscious, intentional awareness.
Which is everything we do as therapists.
Exactly. So let's figure out what we're up to and what our kids are up to and help them do the same. And we're going to be in good shape. This isn't, an unaddressable problem.
And I just think it's not unaddressable, but it's also not going away. It's only going to be, I think, more and more of I don't even want to say concern, because hopefully it doesn't need to be a concern if people again, have artful and intentional ways of managing it with their kids. And this
Right.
book can be a tool in helping people do that. But technology is not going away.
Right.
We're more and more dependent on it. Even people our generation, right? We didn't grow up with these things, but now it's part of our lives.
Yes.
Last week when my computer crashed and I told you about it, and
Yeah.
that was an amazingly big scare.
Yes.
But this is the world we live in now, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, and I was slow to reply because my phone face had cracked. Your computer crashed, my phone face cracked, and it's weird how much that kind of thing throws you off.
Gosh.
Did you have this experience? While I was waiting for my replacement phone to be shipped, I had kind of a great day. Like once I was able to email some people who were expecting to hear from me or be able to contact me by phone, and I was able to say, look, email me if you need me kind of thing, so that all that anxiety of, being contactable was taken care of. It was contained. Then I just, I had nothing to walk around with and keep me occupied. I really had to live in the moment again.
Right.
Like what a concept.
Yeah.
Yeah. What are we doing otherwhy?
Well, and it forced me to practice what I preach, which is, there are setbacks, there are obstacles, again, technology related or otherwise, but that can set off all sorts of thoughts and fears and catastrophic ideas, and how to sort of say, okay, those things are in your head and feel so real.
Yes.
But every moment is unique and doesn't have to. It doesn't mean that's what's going to happen, and doesn't mean I'm never,
right.
This whole podcast is going to shut down.
Right. Yep.
And because here we are taping, so.
Exactly. Yeah. Beautiful.
Let me pay you some compliments on this book.
Thanks.
Because I got to say, first of all, you wrote a book. That's insane. Amazing. Congratulations.
Thank you.
But there were an amazing amount of references in this book that I cataloged a few of. First of all, just the amount of pop culture stuff. I mean, you're talking about technology and parenting, but somehow you found a way to work in references to X-Men, Sex and the City, a forgotten classic from our generation, So I Married an Axe Murderer. My gosh. The Phil Jackson and the Triangle Offense. My gosh. I mean, you've been living here too long.
Right.
Disney, Big Lebowski, Cheers. I mean, that's already impressive, regardless of the topic.
Those are all in there. That is true.
You forgot.
I had forgotten some.
I didn't. I was very impressed.
Thank you.
Yes. And as a psychologist, you're working it all in here. To apply in a tangible way to this topic,
sure.
right? I mean, you got the marshmallow study, you got some 12-step HALT, HALT.
Yeah, sure.
You got object permanence, some classic cognitive behavior stuff, cognitive restructuring and distortions, emotional reasoning, and then some behaviorist learning theory, response cost, positive reinforcement. Nicely done.
Oh, thank you.
Wove it all in.
Thank you so much. Yeah. It was.
Well, talk about the process of writing the book and broadly speaking and how you got all that in there.
Oh, yeah. My gosh. It was enormously difficult. And in some ways, it wrote itself because it was what I was doing every day.
Mm-hmm.
And then that is sort of how I think. Like, oh, this isn't so dissimilar from Big Lebowski when he's, this aggression will not stand,
Obscure
man.
references, dude.
Yeah. Because, that's what parents are needing to tell their kids. Like, you're not going to freak out on me, man.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm like, oh, yeah, we've all seen this done, even if we haven't done it in our own homes. We've seen it modeled for us. We can do this. And so those kind of pop culture references are just floating around in my head all the time anyway. And probably as you do, sometimes it can be useful right there in session to use a clip or a reference and say, this is kind of how you might go about it or how you might think about it. And it breaks the ice and it keeps things humorous.
Or sometimes it bombs, like you and I reference a movie quote that one of us knows, and they're just like, no, yeah.
No, I don't think that ever happens.
It's never happened for you.
We're hilarious.
People always know whatever it is that you're referencing, right?
There's never a bomb.
I need to learn from you, my gosh.
No, of course, yeah, it can fall flat.
Yeah, well, but it keeps things light and
yeah.
provides a metaphor for illustrating a point.
Yes.
in your reception to this book, have there been any interesting or challenging responses, feedback that you've gotten from people that have read the book or people that have written to you?
Right. Yeah. Oh, great question. So there was that student in the waiting room who I was thrilled to hear thumbing through it and then lifting it up and saying, "Mom, you need to read this because it's fair." I was like, yes, that's exactly what I was going for. So on goodreads.com, I decided a couple of weeks ago foolishly to check how things were going. And, it's still got a nice, strong rating. And somebody wrote a really favorable review. And then at the end, they said, in summary, this book was good, but it wasn't amazing like I wanted it to be. And I was like, oh my gosh.
Okay.
I've never put something out there for public consumption.
Indeed.
And it helped me identify with all my favorite artists and writers and stuff, because I was like, oh yeah, you're going to get panned a little. And not that was a pan.
Right, I'm sure we could get worse.
Oh, yes. And I was like, less than amazing. This is... It's like song lyrics by my favorite band, The National, when they're talking about being less than amazing. I was like, yes, I really get how that feels.
There's that pop culture reference again.
True.
Joe's the master there.
It's all over the place.
We haven't worked on a Hoosiers reference yet. How are we going to do that?
Hickory,
of course. Oh my gosh. Deadpan, dead silence. This is what running a podcast. You get no feedback from the audience, because we're talking into two mics here.
That's right.
Any other quick take-homes, summaries on this topic or about the book, Joe?
I think it's what we hit a moment ago about mindful awareness and intentional conscious movement, in our space and in our lives with whatever we're doing, being really present with the person across from you, as you're, here's a take-home. When you walk into a restaurant, check out the diners vegging out, not with what's on their plates, but with what's on their phones as they take pictures of what's on their plates. I'm not saying don't ever post to Instagram. Of course not. Or post food to Instagram. Of course I'm not saying that. The idea is, can you do that here and there and stay in the moment with the meal? Like, we're so lucky to and so fortunate to even be able to sit down and have food. And the person or people across from you, can we all just do that together and enjoy and savor, and not just be thinking about how what we are up to is going to look to somebody else when we broadcast it on a platform.
Right. Well, I've talked a lot about mindfulness to date on this podcast, and I don't know if you even reference that word so much, but just the idea of we have to be able to tune in.
Yes.
To ourselves, to the present moment, to our thoughts, to our feelings, towards our bodies, and I think that's universal to some extent. But as convenient and as necessary as technology is these days, that's going to be something we're going to have to be all that more intentional about going forward. And that's not just for kids and parents, just people in general, you and I. Because we live in the present moment. We don't live in the future or the past.
Right.
And when you're enjoying a good meal, sure, if you want to commemorate it and share it with your friends, take a picture, but enjoy the meal.
Right, yes.
Because you're not going to eat that meal again.
That's it,
right?
That's it.
You can come back and order the same thing, but it might be a different experience, right?
Perfect.
Second time's never as good, right?
Right, well, and like you said, qualitatively different, because everything will be just a little different.
Right.
For a summary overall effect or a cumulative overall effect that is a different experience, so.
Nicely said. Well, I had a couple of questions that I was asking my guests at the beginning, but I figured we'd just dive into content today, and so I'll tack them on at the end for you, Joe.
Sure.
Is there, other than the book that we're talking about, any other book or resource you'd like to highlight for the audience, or one that you recommend a lot for or in your practice?
Yeah. Okay. So I'm being blown away right now reading a book that's been out for like a decade, but I just got my hands on it. It's called Difficult Conversations, and it's by the authors or the researchers behind the Harvard Negotiation Project. And the subtitle of the book is something like How to Discuss What Matters Most. And so for us as clinicians, as parents, as people who are engaged in social relationships, I can't recommend it enough. On the business front, on the family front, it is what it says, how to have a difficult conversation, because stuff comes up and we all convey so much more than just what we say or what we intend to say.
Indeed.
And so being able to separate out intention from impact and then, listen to the other person's intention and share with them what impact, whatever they said had on you. My gosh, it's powerful.
Yeah.
And I'm loving it, and I can't recommend it enough.
I'll have to check that out.
Yeah.
Is there a work of art, music, film, TV that's really left an impression on you?
Yes. Okay. So this one goes back a few years.
Uh-oh.
Uh-huh. So I grew up in Des Moines, Iowa, and, we would get good musical acts coming through, but not, I wouldn't say frequently. It was regular, but not frequent. And they would come to a place in Ames, Iowa, about a half hour's drive from Des Moines. And so I'm 16, and my brother and I had still one of our favorite bands, but at the time it was absolutely our favorite band, R.E.M. And they had just released Monster, and they were going on this massive tour. I mean, it was the pinnacle of their success probably. And they were coming to town, and we thought, we got to get tickets, and good ones. And so we hatched this scheme. I don't know if you can call it a scheme because it was perfectly legal, but it was...
The fact that you call it a scheme is indicative of something.
Right. There's something up. And
you got to bribe somebody and not reward them. How else are we going to get into the show?
Perfect. We're like, yeah. So we had to come up with something. And, this is back when there's no online Ticketmaster. This is all, Ticketmaster locations and outlets, or you can order by phone, which was a joke. It was basically listening to a busy signal and thinking, oh, I wish I were listening to my favorite band. So we came up with this idea where we had family in Kansas City, and we would send them to their Ticketmaster outlet to buy tickets for a show in our state. Now, I can't believe this worked because it's in the same time zone. Like, it's Kansas City and Des Moines are both Central Standard Time. So if there was any ticket for any event going on in Kansas City going on sale that day, then they would have run into a huge line just like we would have in Des Moines trying to get tickets
What's
for
the difference?
R.E.M.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Right. But somehow we scored where it was like my aunt's mom or something got in line for us down in Kansas City, and there was no line down there because I guess nothing was going on sale that day. And she scored my brother and me and a couple of friends 6th row floor seats to R.E.M. Monster. And I'm not talking like 6th row plus a orchestra pit or 6th row sort of balcony. This was like 6th row, eye contact, the whole deal.
Michael Stipe's sweat dripping all over you.
It was fantastic.
You lost your religion as a result of being that close to him.
At 16, this was, unbeatable.
Yeah, you're right.
But in terms of the impact, I was thinking about this. Like, what did that really do to me? I think, if nothing else, it demonstrated how possible it is to own space, to occupy, fill up physical space, because they came in and delivered just like you would have wanted them to as a massive fan. They just owned it. Like, wow. We're here. This is what we do. Well, that's what they said. We are R.E.M. and this is what we do. And it really stuck with me.
Drop the mic. We owned it.
That's right.
We killed it.
That's right. So it's really fun.
I see. And that was the end of the world as you know it.
See,
I'm feeding off of you, man. I'm not usually this quick, I swear.
I don't think so.
Oh, gosh. Any other, we kind of shared one there, but any other kind of a personal experience that taught you a valuable life lesson? You shared one in Moments of Meaning as well, but
yeah.
We're clinicians, but I treat this podcast as real people talking about our own real life experiences.
Sure.
Anything you can share with the audience?
Yeah. So in my office on the wall, there's a plastic and rubber oar, like a paddle from a boat. And teenagers and their parents ask me all the time, "What is that? And what's it doing in your office? Oh, you were a rower? Did you do crew and stuff?" And I'm like, no. The story is that when I was about 5, my parents and I went and visited another aunt who was living on a lake in central Iowa. And my dad and I brought this inflatable, 2-person rubber raft and a couple of oars. And I remember getting into the boat with him, and that's about all I remember. But I guess the story is that we paddled out into the middle of the lake, which was, I don't know, half a mile or more across, like it was a really wide lake. And he says that we were paddling into the wind for an hour and a half, and that I was just paddling my heart out, and that we got to the middle of the lake, and he said something like, well, do you want to kind of drift back to shore, or you want to try to make it to the other side? And evidently, without hesitation, I said, we're going.
We are going.
We are making it. And we did. And he said he had this epiphany at that time that I was going to do something as a career that took just a ridiculous amount of persistence. So he saved the oar that I was paddling with. And when I finished my doctorate, he had it mounted.
Wow.
Yeah, major. And so, teens and I will talk about, all right, we have to keep paddling. How are we going to? Yeah.
Or the Finding Dory, just keep swimming, just keep swimming.
That's it. Yeah, how are we going to get through this? Yeah.
Wow, that's nice. And a real meaningful sort of father-son token and story.
Yeah. Big time bonding. And he's a psychologist too back in Iowa. And so I really got first became interested in the field through him. And we still swap, stories and notes all the time. So
good stuff.
Good stuff.
All right. He's Dr. Joe Dilley, clinical psychologist at Synergy Psychological Inc. in Sierra Madre, and the author of The Game is Playing Your Kid, How to Unplug and Reconnect in the Digital Age. You can check out the book's website at www.don'tgetplayed.com, correct?
Correct.
Any other references or links related to the book to plug? Or
No, it's been strange. I've been trying not to do exactly what I tell people to moderate in their own lives in the book, which is, all kinds of social media. So I post to Instagram and Twitter and everything, but, that can't be.
Not in front of your kids. Behind closed doors, that's right.
Perfect. I've been working with Disney informally lately with a product they have called Circle. And Circle's an all-in-one kind of tech management solution that sits on your router. And so it helps you and your kids monitor screen time and screen content and everything. And so that's another one to look up just at meetcircle.com.
Cool.
Yeah.
Check that out. Yep. Next book coming up for you?
Oh, boy. Okay, honestly, I do have a few different manuscripts going.
Oh, man.
But I don't know how I'm going to finish them anytime soon. So I would say, there will be another one someday. It might be my wife's turn. She's got to write a book on autism because that's her specialty.
Right. Yes.
And so maybe hers will be next.
Okay, but for you, we'll keep the audience in suspense.
Yeah? Yes.
You're keeping me in suspense, my gosh.
Oh, good.
Dr. Joe Dilley, thanks for coming over. Appreciate your time. Thank you for writing this book and coming over to talk about it.
Thank you so much.
Yep. And that was my friend and colleague, Dr. Joe Dilley. Certainly a very timely written book, and I think Joe really did a good job bringing some of these abstract concepts down to a level that's concrete and easy to understand. So, and there are a lot of very practical things in the book, so check it out. We've said it before here, mindfulness. It's not surprising to me that the mere intention to be aware in the present moment, engaged with ourselves, is very trendy and popular right now because we all have increasing competition for our attention. More information, more things to attend to, more things to distract us, and more at our fingertips. Screens, games, phones, tablets, watches. So, we all have to learn how to balance the convenience and the benefits of technology with the allure of constant availability and information, YouTube, games that can suck you in for hours. So it comes more naturally for some people than for others to stay connected to oneself. And if there's one thing that any experienced therapist will tell you, it's when we overly distract from or don't confront what we have going on inside of us, what's under the surface. When we're not at least minimally introspective, that's when things can catch up to us. So we really need to model, structure, and impart that for our children. Screens and smartphones aren't the devil. They're helpful tools, but we do need to get out ahead so that our most loved ones can have a healthy relationship with technology and develop a good balance at a younger age. As usual, links to Dr. Dilley's and any other books mentioned here are on the website, psychrallypodcast.com. please write in. I'd love to hear about and learn from your experiences as a parent, an educator, or as someone who yourself has struggled with or faced negative consequences as a result of overuse of technology or screens. That's a wrap for today. Thanks as always for joining us in the Rally.